Sorry, I was muted. Good afternoon from Vienna, and welcome and thank you for participating today to our open Donau Soja webinar on soya markets, trends, and forecast in Europe 2024. We will also see why sustainable soy from Ukraine is a regional need for the EU. My name is Franco Petri. I'm head of communications of Donau Soja, and I will guide you through the next hour with our three speakers today. I will replace Susanne Fromwald, who was supposed to be the facilitator today, but she has an urgent meeting in the Austrian Parliament. Some notes to this webinar today. The Donau Soja series of webinars is called Impulses, and they are normally only open for Donau Soja members. But this time we opened it also to non-Donau Soja members. We have now about 170 registrations from 27 countries right now. Some of them come from Uruguay, some from Brazil. So good morning, not good afternoon. That shows us our topics are really burning and there is a need for information and updates. And yes, beforehand, before you ask in the chat, you will of course get the recording of the webinar and also the links to the presentations emailed tomorrow or maybe day after tomorrow. So what are the topics today? Last year in November, we presented the Harvest in Europe 2023 in our Donau Soja market report. This webinar is dedicated to the year 2024 and to the outlook to European harvest. The topics and the speakers today will be, my presentation does not work at the moment, but it doesn't matter, you will see them later. Leopold Rittler is the Program Director of Agriculture and Innovation and Member Relations. He will provide a general recap about soybean cultivation in Europe, where it is grown and what are the sustainability benefits. The second presentation will be about the newest market statistics, the developments and forecasts for European soybean area in 2024. And this will be shown and presented by Bertalan Krupa, our market analyst of Donau Soja, who is located in or based in Hungary, in Budapest. Last but not least, our colleague Volodymyr Bugachov, Executive Director of Donau Soja and Regional Director in Eastern Europe, in the Ukraine, will speak about sustainable soya supply from the Ukraine. How important is the Ukraine soya for the EU? Well, during the presentation, you can write your questions in the chat. Please address your questions to one of the speakers. This makes it easier for us. We also received some questions along with your registration, a few of them. So we will try to respond to as many questions as possible. And yeah, after all the talks are over, I'm trying technically to de-share my presentation now and would hand over to Leopold Rittler from Donau Soja right now. De-share is possible and the other
Hello, everyone.
Going up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franco, for the introduction. I'm just opening the presentation. Can you give me a short sign if you see it well already? Yes? Thank you very much. Dear guests, it's a great pleasure for me to have so many attendees, participants today in this webinar. And I also noticed in the list of participants that there are a lot of competent soybean experts here today. And yeah, I'm looking forward to have also the discussion and dialogue with you after our presentations on soy this year here in Europe. In my presentations during the next few minutes, I will take a general point of view about soy cultivation in Europe and will make some general reflections about it before my colleague Bertalan will dive directly into the market topics.
Leopold, sorry for interrupting you for a moment. Yeah. Could you present the whole screen, because we see just a part of the screen and the next slide.
Maybe now it should work.
Now it works perfectly.
Wonderful. Thank you, Franco. And everyone, could you please also mute your microphones? Thank you very much. So I'd like to start my presentation with showing you a map about soybean cultivation in Europe. And you see here in the dark green colors where soybean is grown on the arable land, so the share of soy on arable land. And we like to call this map the European soybean belt. It stretches from south of France over to Central Europe, to Ukraine, and further to the east. And if you would look a few years into the future, we will be also pretty sure that north of Austria, north of Slovakia, in countries like Germany or Poland, probably also in Benelux, we'll see in future also more of these green spots, showing that soybean is also growing to the north. Beside of this geographical distribution, I'd like to share with you also an interesting info that soybean is also growing very well, actually, in many places here. Marta, can you please mute yourself?
Oh, those. You're a little bit hard.
Thank you very much. This ranking here shows the top 10 soya yields worldwide, based on national average yields per country, and ranked them by tons per hectare. So you can see that among the top 10 countries, 6 countries are from Europe. And this underlines or demonstrates that soy can grow actually very well and fits very well into many places here. But at the same time, soy is not the only crop that grows very well here. There are also other crops like cereals or maize that grow very well, that are shown here in this graph in the beige color. So you see here the share of harvest areas of annual crops in Europe, and it's clearly visible that the green color soybean or bright green pulses are really small on our arable land. Only 4% of our arable land in the European Union is covered with legumes. So there is a clear lack of legumes in our rotations, which are actually dominated by cereals and maize. This is in contrast, very much in contrast to the exporting countries, where up to 60% are covered with legumes or soy. And an important factor why expanding legumes is very beneficial, or particularly beneficial in Europe, is linked because of this small acreage which is at the moment. So by expanding this small acreage of 4%, we can really contribute a lot to crop diversification on our arable fields, and this directly or indirectly leads to several positive benefits or possible improvements of our crop rotations. This I would like to show you here on this slide. So there are one side of factors or benefits that relate to the field, like improvement of humus or carbon storage, positive soil structure for cropping the next crops, systemic improvements as we, if we diversify our crop rotations, we might be able to break pest cycles that are common in cereals. So diseases or pests that are impacting cereals can be better addressed or attacked by inserting a new crop into rotation, and this will lead in the end to less pesticide needs also and better production of other crops. Indirectly, growing more legumes will contribute to a systemic improvement. We will be able to reduce our N2O emissions that are linked to nitrogen fertilizers, because soy or other legumes don't need the nitrogen fertilizers. Also less risk of leakages, or indirectly will contribute to protect sensitive ecosystems overseas, grasslands or forest ecosystems. So in this webinar, I'm so far now talking about some very general aspects. My colleague Bertalan will talk in a few minutes about the particular aspects related to this year, to the soybean cultivation this year. And in the next slide, I want to add some thoughts next to the environmental benefits, also further thoughts on benefits or aspects related to the expansion of soy and closing our soybean protein gap. So as you know, we are heavily reliant on imports to cover our soybean needs. I'd like to add some thoughts about increasing the European cultivation of soy to close this gap. There are studies which show that there is a potential of 2 or 3 million hectares of soy cultivation in the EU, where we have at the moment 1 million hectares so far. And some are saying, okay, this will go on the cost of cereals and we will become a net importer of cereals. And this is very unlikely to be the case. Here I looked up the data before the start of the war. And on average, we were having a net export of cereals of 28 million tons. This translates to about 5 million hectares of wheat, which was net exported outside of the EU. So there's much of space available that could be used for soy without becoming a wheat importing continent. So this is one thought. Another thought is related to closing the yield gap, so increasing the harvest of the current soy fields. What is necessary for that? Clearly, skilled and trained farmers in soy cultivation, as well as high quality inputs and many further aspects as well, of course. But yeah, for these two aspects, skilled farmers and quality inputs, we are directly contributing as organizations through our Donau Soja Academy events, trainings, etc. So this I'd like to add here as a thought. And thirdly, and also extremely important for this protein gap is how we use the soybean and how we use protein in Europe. So if we would better implement healthy and sustainable diets, work better on precision feeding aspects, or use other protein sources very efficiently, we could reduce our total needs. So this is the third pillar, which would be very helpful for closing the protein gap, the soy gap here in Europe. I would like to close my presentation with, excuse me, this some words about self-promotion of our carbon footprint data that we are providing for companies or for market partners, or all of you actually. And this is about the climate benefits that are linked to soy cultivation here in Europe, linked to certified European Donau Soja production. So on the left hand, you see a chart of the emissions of the level of soybean cultivation, so kilograms CO2, kilograms per kilogram of soybean. And Brazilian production is much more carbon intensive because of the heavy emissions coming from grassland or forest conversion. Minus 90% is the result on the level of beans. And this is compared to our certified data that has been is based on surveys we did with 70 farmers in our producing countries. We did this according to the state-of-the-art methodology, and the data is also available in the AgriFilter GFLI database for your product calculations. So for your Scope 3 emissions, you can use our data if you use our certified beans or feed products or food products. And we also looked in the second step and compared our data, kilogram of CO2 emissions per kilogram of soybean, with the values that are available in the databases for European countries, and generated an average which is 0.82. And our values are my minus 50% better than this combined value. And these are several explanations. The biggest, most important explanations is that we are, with our certification, strictly excluding all kinds of conversion that is impacting the CO2 footprint. So we are have a cut-off date that goes back to 2008. And this is very beneficial to exclude any of emissions that are related to grassland conversion or permanent arable land conversion. And secondly, another explaining factor is that the yield levels of the farmers that were surveyed might have been better than the average default values that went into the databases. So minus 50% can be achieved on the level of beans, and this is even translating on the level of meat or egg production into a cut of emissions by even up to minus 40%. So this data are available in AgriFootprint and a GFLI database. And if you have further questions about it, please reach out to us. And this was my presentation. And yeah, I hand over now to Franco again.
Thank you, Leopold, for the presentation and also for the crash course in the Donau Soja protein strategy, how we can fill the protein gap in Europe. Yeah, Dee shared now your presentation, and I think the next presentation will be especially interesting for non-Donau Soja members, because normally only members of Donau Soja get the market report. And what Bertalan Krupa, our market analyst in Budapest, in Hungary, will provide us, will for surely be very interesting for you, because it's the year 2024 and for your planning. So I ask Bertalan for your presentation, please. Yes, we can see a nice background. Maybe we can make it a little bit. That's super fine. Perfect.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Franco. Hello, everybody. My name is Bertalan Krupa, and I am the market analyst for Donau Soja. And in the next 10 or 12 minutes, I'm going to give you an insight in the current market trends in Europe. There will be 3 topics that I am going to touch on. The first one is the most important. What is our forecast for 2024? The soya sowing is approaching, and it's important to look at it, what we expect. The second topic, we go back and see that what was the harvest within the EU in the previous season. And I also speak here about the self-sufficiency ratio within the EU. And lastly, I will give you an insight in the recent soya prices trends. So firstly, let's look at the what we expect in the soya areas in Europe this season. Firstly, I would like to show you that what are the driving factors that support the expansion of soya area in Europe. You will see that in total Europe and also in most part of the Europe, the soya area is expanding. And this expansion is driven by a lot of factors, including soya prices. Current soya prices are relatively favorable when we compare it with other grains such as maize, and this situation drives farmers to plant more soya. Second is energy costs. We are still facing a relatively high fertilizer and energy costs, and soya is a less energy and fertilizer intensive crop compared to its competitors such as maize. And when there is high energy costs, farmers tend to switch some of their areas from maize and from other grains to soya and other legumes. Third driving factor is the rainy autumn. Last autumn, we faced very wet conditions, and that's why in some regions or in some farms, the wheat and other winter crops couldn't be sown. So that's why the farmers need on these farms to switch to spring crops from winter crops. And soya is among the spring crops. So some of these areas will go to soya sowing. The fourth factor, we recorded a very high soya yield last year in Europe, and farmers tend to follow the recent memories that they remember that they had very good performance in the soya fields last year. So they have they are encouraged to crop soya again this year. The fifth factor is policy. Mostly in the EU, there are a lot of financial incentives in place that support crop rotation and also protein crops, and this is favorable for the soya farmers. And there are also some long-term trends, including there is a growing demand for deforestation-free soybean, and there is also a growing demand for local and sustainable soybean within the EU, and it is also beneficial or favorable from soybean. It's also a very interesting question. We will see that how the new EUDR regulation will impact the soya area in the near and long term. So we spoke about the driving factors, and let's see what we expect this season in Europe. We expect that the growth of soybean expansion continues, and this year we forecast that the growth will be between 10 and 15%. Here I would like to highlight that we base our prognosis on information that we receive from experts and seed companies from different countries in Europe. These are based on unofficial and informal talks. So let's see the different countries. I will present here the 3 biggest soya producers in Europe. One of it is the EU. After the stagnation in the recent years, we expect a similar growth rates this season, 10 and 15% expansion in the soya area. Let's see the biggest soya producer, Ukraine. Despite of the war, the soya area is increasing very fast in Ukraine. This year we expect, or actually this information comes from the Ukrainian Ministry, the growth will be likely to be around 20%, which is a very great achievement in the view of the war. And Serbia is also an important producer in the EU, in Europe. And after the big drop in 2023, we expect a rebound, and this rebound can be as high as 60 or 65% this season. The big drop last year was because of the very dry weather devastated the yields in 2022. And that's why in 2023, there was not enough seed for sowing soya area. And that's why the drop was so radical in 2023. So until now, I spoke about forecast. Now let's go back and see our estimation of the harvest last season. And I will also speak about the self-sufficiency ratio in the soya market within the EU. So in the EU, last year, we recorded a record soya crop. This is the output, how it developed in the EU. There was a very massive 33% increase in 2023. But the big question is how big it is, what is enough for this big soya crop. It is actually it is quite small when we compare it with the total soya consumption. The total soya consumption is 10 times bigger compared to the output. So here we talk about quite low self-sufficiency ratio. the self-sufficiency ratio is about 8%, and it is very risky, mostly when there is a time of war or COVID or other crisis, because we are highly dependent on import, and all of our output in the EU is non-GM, but the usage, very massive part of it is GM, because we are dependent on import, and the biggest part of the import is GM. One of the important questions that how much is the share of non-GM within the total usage? We have only a very rough estimation in this field. We suggest, or our calculations suggest that this ratio or this share is about 7 million tons out of the 35 million tons. And from now on, I focus only on this part of the consumption. So we said that the output is 3 million tons and the non-GMO consumption is 7 million tons. We can simply calculate that almost half of the non-GMO demand within the EU can be covered by domestic production. How the other part is covered? It is covered by import. One of the important suppliers is Brazil. It is about 2 million tons. I would like to highlight here again that these are only rough calculations. The other part, a smaller share, comes from Ukraine. It is about 1 million ton, and the rest comes from others, such as Serbia, Canada, or African countries, for example, Togo. And in the recent years, the share of the EU supply and the Ukrainian supply was growing here, and the Brazilian share was declining, which means that the non-GMO demand is more and more supplied by European sources. Okay, now we are going to the last part of my presentation, is the soya prices. Most of the time when I speak about non-GM soybean prices in Europe or within the EU, I look at the Bologna prices for different reasons. There is an important stock exchange in Bologna, and soybean is traded in Bologna in this stock exchange. Other important factor why we focus on these prices from Bologna, that actually around Bologna, in Italy, there is a massive soybean production. And what is happening in Bologna, I believe that it mirrors the market trends in the neighboring regions, such as South Germany or Austria. So let's see what happened in Bologna over the recent 15 months. We see a declining trend of non-GMO soybean prices. Actually, non-GMO soybean prices in Bologna and in the EU highly depend on what happens on the global market, what happens with the conventional and GM soybean on the global market. And for that reason, what happens in the two main producers in the US and Brazil, it has a great impact on the prices within the EU and Bologna. And over the recent 3 months, there was a 10% decrease. And the biggest factor that drove this price decline was Brazil. There is harvest time at this moment in Brazil, and the plentiful or abundant soya volume is harvested at this moment in Brazil, and this pressure the soya prices downwards. At this moment, the non-GM soybean price is about 435 euros per tons. Is it high or not? when we compare it with the last 5 years, then we see that the average prices of the last 5 years was a bit higher, 484 euros per tons. So from this point of view, the soya prices are a bit lower. But when we focus to the period which is before the crisis period is the COVID and Ukrainian war, when the prices went up very much, unexceptional levels. If we exclude this crisis period, then we see that the current non-GM soy prices are higher what we recorded in the past. And the big question, how it will develop in the next months, I said that it closely follow the global soybean prices. So the question how the Brazil harvest develop and how the soya crop in the US will change and develop, it will be the main, it will impact soya prices in the EU. So this was my presentation, and I give back the floor to Franco. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bertel, for the presentation. I think you showed pretty well how important European soy is and how sensitive even the European livestock industry is regarding feed, protein feed. That's why we have to fill the protein gap in Europe. I would hand over now to Vladimir Pugachev. He's in Kiev right now and talking to us from Kiev. And he's Executive Director of Donau Soja and Regional Director in Eastern Europe in Ukraine. And as you saw in the slides before, the Ukraine has quite a crucial role for the European soya protein supply. And so, Vladimir, I would ask you to share the presentation with us.
Thank you, Franco, for this nice introduction. Good afternoon, good morning, and maybe good evening, dear colleagues from all around the world at our webinar. It's really a great pleasure to welcome all of you, professionals in agriculture and food industry, environmental and social industries at our webinar. Related to the upcoming season of soya in Europe. I will talk about Ukraine, its relevance with soya, how generally European Union and Ukraine may find the synergies really to strengthen the agri-food production chains across the continent. So let's start with a slide related to the history of soya production in Ukraine. So as was presented by my colleagues, Bertel and Leo, Ukraine now is the biggest European producer of soybeans. However, it was not always like this. As you may see, the like normal professional cultivation of soya in Ukraine started around 2006 with really small areas that were decreasing, but finally 1 million hectare was planted in 2010, and the threshold of 2 millions was exceeded in 2015. After that, it was a small decrease in areas related to the prices, related to the legislational and fiscal changes in Ukraine by introduction of export duties. Thus, soya areas decreased, but starting from 2022 and especially 2023 and what we expect in 2024, the soya areas are increasing in Ukraine because it's almost the only profitable crop in Ukraine because of the big part of logistics in the cost of production and deliveries of other crops. So as it was told, this year we expect plus 21% of soya area in Ukraine. It's also interesting to look at the information related to the yields of the soybeans. As you may see, the yields ton per hectare increasing, which means that farmers really becoming more professional and understand how to grow soya. As you can see, it was started with 1.2 tons per hectare, which is almost nothing in 2006, but then the knowledge, the practices, also because of the interventions of Donau Soja organization in Ukraine, because of the Donau Soja Academy, the yields really now reaching almost 3 million tons. Definitely, the average yield is less than 2.5. But I should say that companies and professional farmers that grow soybeans in Ukraine, they easily reach more than 3 tons per hectare. But there is also some small and medium farmers that are not so perfect in the knowledge, and they are not using, for example, original seeds for production of soybeans because of absence of operational costs. That's why because of these big differences of almost 1 or 1.5 tons between professional soya farmers and some small and medium soya farmers, that's why the average yield, soya yield in Ukraine is on this level, 2.44, as you may see now. I should say that Ukraine is self-sufficient with any kind of crops, food products, including soybeans. So almost all agricultural industry is oriented for exporting in Europe or all around the world. Under normal circumstances, meaning if there was not the war in place now, almost 75% of Ukraine's grain production, it was exported, and the same it's with soybeans. So the self-sufficiency ratio exceeds 4 times the internal consumption of soybeans, and the big share of soybeans is exported to European Union, to Turkey, to China, to Egypt are the main consumers of soybeans from Ukraine, as well as soya meal is also exported. So when we talk about soya production, it's mainly such big amounts that produced, it's mainly exported. I should say you about yield gap in Ukraine. So yield gap in Ukraine, my colleague Leopold has kindly touched this topic related to the overall European production of overall crops. And definitely this is a great topic for Ukraine, and it shows a possibility for development of soya production in Ukraine. So definitely yield gap is a concept that based on the definition and measurement of the yield potential. Based on the data by Wageningen University, Statistical Service of Ukraine, and our own internal calculations of our Agricultural and Innovation Department in the organization, we identified that soil gap in Ukraine is around 1 million ton per hectare. To be precise, it's 0.9 tons per hectare. That represents around 27% of the soybean yield potential. So if we talk only on the country level, meaning that not changing the structure of arable lands and not changing the structure of soya sowing and other crop sowing, it could be easily produced additional 1.3 million tons of soybeans just simply by improving the cultivation practices of farmers. And improving the potential of the country. What Donau Soja is doing in this relation, I will show you a bit further on the slide. Before that, I would like to emphasize the importance of climate change in Ukraine. As you may see that climate conditions in Ukraine, they changed significantly for the last 30 years. On the left side, you can see the map of agroclimatic zones of Polissa, forest steppe and steppe in Ukraine on the beginning of 1990s. And on the right side, it's a map from Hydrometeorological Center of Ukraine, representing the data at the beginning of 2020s. And the consequence is that steppe area is moving to the north of Ukraine, meaning that Ukraine is becoming hotter with less amount of rains on the one side. On the other side, it's giving great possibility for farmers in central Ukraine to shift the crop rotation to soya, because previously at the 1990s, and you have seen this on the slide of the areas, soya was not so popular in Ukraine. Now the weather conditions are becoming more and more in favor of this crop. especially for regions located not so far from the European Union, which gives additional possibility and additional potential for the country production. Definitely that the adaptation to the climate change should be done by the farmers. And here at Donau Soja, we see this as the great possibility for us to introduce sustainability practices on the farm level for soya, and not only soya farmers, because definitely anyway, you are shifting your production methodologies, you are shifting your technology, and it's climate adaptation. It's a great possibility for you to implement sustainable technologies that afterwards will contribute to the climate mitigation in general. So what was done by Donau Soja on this? So actually, we developed agroclimatic atlas for soya growing in Ukraine that provided a comprehensive information on the climate change that is going in Ukraine, impact, and the potential adaptation measures for the soya production in Ukraine, with a special emphasis on soya suitability, soil characteristics, and implementation of sustainable technologies. We established a knowledge transfer option, which is named Soya Discussion Club, under the overall umbrella of Donau Soja Academy, which is an online workshops for farmers, scientists, and agricultural influencers in Ukraine, meaning well-known farmers that are quite good, that are on a quite good level of the technology, with broadcasting to the Facebook and other popular platforms, where different topics related to the soy production is discussed. For example, limited resources on the farm, which was very popular topic when the war started, where it was really not enough fertilizers, fuel, seeds, etc., etc. Proper non-GM seed selection depending on the climatic conditions of the region, usage of inoculation, how to implement integrated pest management on the farm, how to adapt your soy production technology to the climate change that is ongoing. And definitely that any of these activities should be backgrounded or backboned with a practical experiments on the field. And what we do is we establish practical on-field studies with leading agricultural universities in Ukraine that are located in different regions like Sumy or Kiev, which one is more for the north and other one is more for the center of Ukraine, and different varieties, different soil varieties, and different sustainable cultivation measures were studied, were tested, and definitely the topics of adaptation of on-farm technology to the European Union requirements and the European Union practices is a core topic of the studies that afterwards translated and transmitted via the Donau Soja Academy, for example, Soya Discussion Club. Also, I'm very proud that together with colleagues in Ukraine, in Vienna, in Serbia, and all over Europe, we developed a great product, which is actually named Protein Partnership Program. So this product enables the increased cultivation of sustainable soya in European countries outside the EU. For example, like Ukraine, like Bosnia and Herzegovina, like Serbia and Moldova. So the program started, or the product started in 2019, and it continues right now with actually 5 countries with different amount of the partners, which in practice means the Donau Soja organization conducts trainings for agricultural producers under the umbrella of the Donau Soja Academy on sustainable agricultural production approaches and techniques. We also cover the cost for certification under the Donau Soja standards, including analysis for GM contamination, possible GM contamination, and pesticide. And definitely that some climate-friendly or climate-saving benefits are transmitted through the whole value chain. And these benefits, I will show you a bit further. I'm also proud about the results of these activities because as as you may see on your screen, around 1 million tons in overall of soybeans in Ukraine were certified under the Donau Soja standards in the last 2 years, meaning 22 and 23, which represents really big share in the overall amount of Donau Soja soybeans in Europe. And I will touch this topic also slightly, as my colleague Leopold touched it, why we are talking about climate-friendly option or climate-friendly soybeans, because definitely it's branded data sets for carbon footprint, which shows great figures of emission reduction if we look at the Donau Soja certified beans in different countries like Croatia, Romania, Serbia, and Ukraine, and also the carbon footprint of soya meal in the Adampol soya processing plant in Ukraine was cultivated in 2023, and it also shows reduction more than 50% comparing to some general data that is available. So as I told, this data is also transmitted through the whole value chain for companies that are under the Donau Soja umbrella and work closely with Donau Soja on different figures. At this slide, that's it. You may see my contact details on the QR code on the screen if you would like more information, or you would like to know a bit more about the agricultural conditions in Ukraine, about the legislation, about the developments. Please, you can contact me, because I'm also deputy head of agricultural committee in the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Trade, meaning that we are focusing not only on soybeans, but at the whole agri-food value chains all over the Europe. And that's why, please, I'm welcoming you for further discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Kiev, to Volodymyr, and I think the presentation showed how important Ukrainian soya is for the whole Europe, and not only in the past, but will be in the future, and what high potential we have, even in a highly specialized agricultural country in like the Ukraine is, and the meaning for the whole Europe. Well, I'm looking at my list of questions now. Thank you first for all the presentations, to all of you three. Some questions might have been answered already or in the presentations. We probably it won't be possible to go through all of the questions, but I would like to start with one question that was asked beforehand, so during the registration. And this question I would like to direct to Leopold Rittler. And the question is, how will the new EU deforestation regulation impact the trade of soybeans within and without the EU? We're all busy and concerned, and yeah, we're dealing a lot with the EU deforestation regulation. So what would you say?
Yeah, thank you very much, Franco. And yeah, thank you very much for this question also. I mean, this is really that burning questions for this and for this year and the future time to come. It's also hard to answer it. I mean, the short answer and the short outlook you have heard already today, and it's also included in our market report, is that we expect a positive development, meaning an increase of the acreage and the production this year. This is, as Bertalan Krupp already said, it's based on interviews with cultivation experts in the seed business, and ministries, etc. This is the answer on the short outlook. And if you would go more into the detail and maybe try to anticipate possible developments in the future, there are different scenarios which can be assumed. One is that, okay, after this year, which includes expansion, there might be also a decrease, because farmers are more annoyed maybe by this additional administration that the EUDR requires, not only for the imports, but also for the local production, of course. On the other hand, this additional administration is likely to result also in premiums for the producers. This was already communicated or shared with us by major agricultural traders. And so this is also a possibility. They were referring maybe of a premium of up to 100 euro per ton. I mean, sounds extremely much, and it's probably too much already in my feeling, but it gives us maybe a feeling in which direction it could go. So it's really hard to say, because this premium might even say, okay, would increase the competitiveness of soy cultivation even further and might lead to further expansion. So hard to say how it will impact on European soy cultivation. As organization, I'd like to say the last comment on this. We are extremely busy in observing and try to contribute as much as possible to a very smooth implementation for European producers. And as far as our certification schemes concerns, we are quite confident that as far as the EUDR and its details and its requirements are known today, our certified producers will fulfill these requirements as far as they are known today. And there's still much more to learn, hopefully very soon. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Leopold, for this answer. I have two questions I would like to combine actually, and this is also direct to you. So the first one is, what is the ratio between European soy for food and for feed? Comes from somebody from Finland, I think. And the second question is, how much soya will be used as an ingredient for alternative protein? So the questions are very much related and I'll summarize them together.
Yeah, thank you very much, Franco, and thank you for this question. There is no hard statistics available for this question. Our estimations, we are aware of studies and estimations. If you look into the general usage of soy in Europe, it's about 95%. That is, of the imported combined with the locally produced goes into feed applications, 95%. And if it's about the local cultivation, it's maybe around 90%, 85%. These are really estimations. And there are some countries that are stronger or have a bigger focus on food production or on the food sector, such like Austria, where 40 to 50% is assumed to go into food value chains.
Thank you. Another question comes from an Austrian crusher. I think I would also direct it to Leopold. It's when it comes to agricultural imports from the Ukraine. How can Donau Soja better inform politicians? There's a big difference between wheat imports. We know about the protests and the news recently, and soya, where we have a big deficit in Europe. So we have first wheat and other agricultural products, and also the urgent soya need we have in Europe. What is Donau Soja doing about that? As far as I know, we are doing a lot, but I'll let you answer.
I'll start with this, with replying to this, and maybe my colleague Dagmar can add to this also then further. So I touched on this in my presentation. The European Union has been, before the war already, been a massive net exporter of wheat. 28 million tons of wheat were our net exports. This translates into 5 million hectares even. So this is quite a massive amount of, so to say, excessive wheat. It's just like metaphorically meaning. So we have on one hand this net export situation, on the other hand a strong reliance on imports and a deficit of in the soy sector. So while we will anyway need imports to cover our soy needs, we as association are calling for a differentiated discussion here. not treating the net export situation of wheat with the same way as we are treating a deficiency in soy. So we are calling for that the imports we are having should be sustainably certified and should be treated in a discussion differently also. So, and yeah, this is how we contribute as an organization, also offering with our protein partnerships means to accelerate this supply of sustainably certified volumes.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Dagmar Gordon is our Executive Director of Donau Soja Association. If you want to add a few sentences, or
thank you very much. Thank you, Leo, also for your answer here. I would like to hand over the word to Volodymyr to give an answer from the view of Ukraine, because I think the international view on this issue was already very well answered by Leo, but I think it would perhaps also be interesting to hear that, let's say, the second side of this story.
Yes, thank you, colleagues. The answer is really very simple. There was no any legal limitations of the trade between soya and the European Union in the past, and according to the association agreement, despite there were some tariffs, duties, etc., etc., soybeans were always in a free trade. However, the result is seen now. I don't have this slide at the moment, but it's the reorientation of the exports from Ukraine from soya. So Turkey becoming the leading importer of soybeans from Ukraine, and European Union decreases the imports of soybeans. So that's clearly how the producers, traders, and companies are reacting on this situation. However, definitely that the free trade of soya and soybean products still continues to be with the most of the European Union partners, let's say like this.
okay, I think this should be answered. Maybe we have time for one more question. This would also go to Volodymyr. The question is, whilst carbon footprint reductions is really positive in terms of deforestation and land use change, is there data for European soy which is deforestation free? I think this answer was in all three presentations, but maybe you can repeat it for, to emphasize it one more.
Sure. Thank you for this question. I'm now
very
sharing,
short, please. We have only a couple of
yes,
seconds.
I'm now sharing the relevant slide on this, and actually, as you can see, here is the data for actually Europe in general, for carbon footprint of soybeans in Europe in general. This is 0.82. Whilst the certified soybeans with improved cultivation technologies that results in the carbon savings are really less. So this is easy and quite fast.
Thank you, Volodymyr. Yeah, I think we're coming to the end. If you have any other burning questions, you can always direct them to our experts. Thank you for participating today. Yeah, we hope the webinar was interesting for you. And as I said in the beginning, you will receive an email with the presentations and with the recording. In this email, you will also find the contact to the speakers of today. So yeah, in the end, I wish you a nice evening, morning, and also noon, depending on where you are at the moment. And thank you for participating today. Have a nice rest of the day or beginning. Bye-bye.